First, let me be all clear, because I am maybe a little bit biased in which of these bikes is the better one, because I have already chosen one of the bikes for my private bike, and that is the V2. But I get so many questions about why did I choose the V2 over the V4, and isn't the V4 a better bike than the V2, and all of these type of questions. So I actually just thought it could be a kind of interesting video for you, and maybe if you already are down at the dealership and can choose in between of those two amazing bikes. And before all of the internet trolls are popping up in the comments saying that, oh, the V2 is just for the poor one. Try live in Denmark, where we have 180% taxes. The V2 in Denmark cost $37,500 and the V4 cost $500,000. So just think about that. So let's begin with comparing them spec for spec. So let's get a spec sheet up and let's get going. If we start with the max power, the Streetfighter V2 has 155 horsepower, where the V4 has a bonkers 208 horsepower. The engine type on the V2 is the Super Quattro 90 degrees V2 engine. It has, of course, the Desmodromic 4 valves per cylinder, and then it's, of course, liquid cooled. The Streetfighter V4 has the, and now I hope I pronounce it correctly, the Desmosedici Stradale 90 degrees V4 rearward rotating crankshaft, 4 Desmodromically actuated valves per cylinder. Liquid cooled, of course, as well. That means that the Streetfighter V2 has a 955cc engine, where the V4 has an 1103cc engine. The max torque on the Streetfighter V2 is 101.4 Newton meters, and the V4 has 123 Newton meters. The fuel capacity on the V2 is 17 liters, where on the V4 it's 16 liters. Not a big difference, but it's bigger on the V2. The saddle height is the exact same, which is 845 millimeters. And where these two bikes are actually a bit different is on the wheelbase, because on the V2 it has 1465 millimeters, where on the V4 it has 1488 millimeters. When comparing them numbers for numbers, it doesn't seem like much, but in the real world usage, it's actually quite a bit. The dry weight on the V2 is 178 kilos, where the V4 is 2 kilos heavier. Not a lot, but just a bit. The front brake diameter on the V2 is 320 millimeter, where we actually get a bigger disc on the V4, which is 330 millimeters. And in the rear, it is the same. It is the 245 millimeter disc. And of course, there is a huge price range in between them as well. A lot of people are saying that the Streetfighter V4 is a track bike, and I'm not quite sure if I agree with them, because yes, if your name is Pecco Bagnaia, of course the V4 would be a better track bike. But for everybody else, including me, and I'm not even the, the regular rider, because I also teach at track days and have a lot of track days every year. But hear me out. One thing I always tell my student, or this is just my regular opinion, that is that the best bike for you is where you are more skilled than your bike, not the other way around. So when saying that the V4 is a better track bike, it's only for a little handful of people, not for you and me probably. And 155 horsepower is more than enough for most people. 208 horsepower is only for the pros. And I'm not saying that you should buy the V2 over the V4 if you only are going to use it for track, but you just have to be honest with yourself on this one. The brakes are also less aggressive on the V2, which I do believe is a bit more convenient in the real world usage in traffic. If you are in a bad situation in traffic where you have to, or where you are panic braking, better brakes that there are on the V2 would only be beneficial on a track where you decide when to use them, and not if someone is driving like an idiot in front of you. And this is just a thing that people aren't thinking about too much. The brakes on the V2 are actually much better than on the brakes on most of the bikes out there. They are incredibly good. So comparing these brakes to the V4 doesn't really make sense because they are useful in two different ways. The brakes on the V4 could easily sweep off an unskilled rider in a stressed situation, and that is not the purpose with the brakes. Would I love to have better brakes? Yes, but actually only for track use. These are more than enough for traffic. These are great as there is. I'm not saying the V4 brakes are bad. We all know that they are performing so much better. But for use in traffic, another thing I've seen that people are arguing about when talking about the V2 versus the V4 is that the Streetfighter V2 has a smaller TFT display. And I gotta be honest with you, if I wanted to look at a big screen, I would stay at home looking at my TV. When I'm riding my motorcycle, the TFT display is not what gets my attention. So for me, I think it's awesome that the TFT display is smaller. I even do believe that the overall design, when talking about the whole headlight piece, is looking better with a smaller TFT display. So for me, it's a win, but for others, it's a deal breaker maybe. The only situation where I think a big TFT dash would be beneficial is when riding an adventure bike on a trail or on an adventure trip, where the information you get on the dashboard is useful for your ride. On a street bike like this, you only have to see how fast you're going. And remember, I'm not talking trash about the V4. The V4 is an amazing bike. This is just the thoughts that because I was in doubt in taking this over the V4. This is just the thought process I was through when choosing in between of those two bikes, and I just thought it would be nice if some of you are in the same process. Another hot topic about the V2 versus the V4 is that the V2 has a slightly decrease in power under 7K revs. And this is not uncommon at all. A street bike is often, or should be, a stripped down version of a sports bike. Like in this case, this was the Panigale V2, now it's stripped down and now it's a Streetfighter V2. And often a remap or major changing to the fuel map or the tune itself is often also a thing that is being done to the bike. I really do believe that they wanted to make a more street friendly, that is the word street bike, a street friendly version of the Panigale V2. So of course they are doing changing in the map itself. It only makes sense. But again, we live in 2022 and it hasn't been as easy it is to do a map yourself. 10 years ago, it was pretty difficult to get your bike flashed or remapped or tuned or whatever you're calling it. But today, there are so many companies offering these small dongles or units so you can tune your bike yourself with the map that you want, that matches your exhaust and your intake and all of these things. It has been so easy to do. So do I think it's a problem? No. Am I going to fix the mapping? Yes. Because it is so easy to achieve, because I would like a little bit more power under 7K revs, but I don't think it's a problem. It has a lot. It really has a lot of power, this bike. It really has. This is not a slow bike. Let me just say that. And again, comparing the performance in between the V2 and the V4 is like comparing apples to bananas. Of course, the V4 would slay the hell out of the V2 in all circumstances. But is it the right choice for you? Wouldn't I love being able to say that I have the best street bike there is and it has over 200 horsepower and nothing could stop me? Of course, I would lie if I didn't want that. But it would only benefit my own ego and not the ride itself. And it's totally okay buying a bike like that with your heart and your ego. And I have done that in the past. So it's okay to buy a bike that is more skilled than you are. It's okay. I'm not going to judge you about that. Because the V4 is an amazing bike. It's so awesome on so many aspects. It also has launch control, which the V2 doesn't have. But again, the V2 is made to be a more it's a street bike, a more street friendlier bike. You can see the V4 is setting the standards on what's possible with a street bike. It's the best of the best, top of the line. Nothing. I actually think that Ducati came with the V4 when they did, probably because Kawasaki came with their CH2, which also was a street bike with over 200 horsepower, also a compressor, and then Ducati came with their Streetfighter V4. So that is the battle of street bikes, together with the KTM Super Duke R1290. But I would say the V4 and the ZH2 is pushing the boundaries a bit more. But that was not the purpose with the V2. The purpose was to make a more road-friendlier bike. And I do believe 98% of you watching this video is going to use your bike in the real world, out on the road in traffic. And you're also going to spend your own hard-earned money, and money is also a factor when buying or when talking about which bike is the better one for you, because you shouldn't buy a bike that you can't afford to ride in the first place. But when talking about which bike is the better one for road use in traffic, I do believe it is the Streetfighter V2 over the V4. And that is why I could have bought the V4, but I actually bought the V2 instead, because I do believe it's much more road friendly. And that was just the thought process I went through when standing at the dealership trying to choose in which one of them I wanted. So I do believe that the Streetfighter V2 is the better bike.